Louis Zamperini was born to Italian immigrants Louise and Anthony Zamperini in Olean, New York. While growing up, Louis wasn't exactly a model citizen, but with the advice of his brother, he was able to channel his rambunctious energy into running. Louis was so successful in doing this that he eventually made it to the 1936 Olympics, which took place in fascist Germany, where he set the American record for fastest 5,000-meter run. After the Olympics, Louis decided to join the Air Corps, where he dropped out and then was redrafted back into the Air Corps when World War II began.
The plane they were assigned to was a beat-up old plane, the Green Hornet, repaired with parts from various planes. However, the new aircraft was not airworthy. Louis and two of his crew members, Mac and Phil, were the only survivors as they crashed into the Pacific Ocean. After the crash, Louis' challenge truly began. He and Phil were able to stay focused on surviving, keeping the raft inflated, and battling hungry sharks. Unfortunately, Mac perished while at sea. The men were able to stay alive on the life raft for 46 days before drifting to the Marshall Islands in enemy territory.
As the two men reached land, they were spotted and captured by the Japanese Imperial Army, who transported them to their first POW camp, Kwajalein, aka Execution Island. While in Kwajalein, Louis and Phil were thrown into tiny, filthy cages, deprived of food and water, and beaten by the guards. After 42 days at Kwajalein, the two men were then transferred to Afuna, which wasn't a POW camp, but rather a secret interrogation center for high-profile prisoners, i.e. Olympians. The abuse at the Afuna Center was even worse than that at Kwajalein.
For the third time, Louis and his friends were transferred to another camp called Omori. This is where Louis met his worst nightmare, Corporal Mutsuhiro Watanabe, also known as the Bird. The Bird derived sick and sadistic pleasure from torturing the POWs both physically and psychologically. He took a liking to singling out Louis for severe, violent treatment. As the American invasion crept closer and closer to Omori, Louis was transferred to his final camp, Naietsu. When he arrived, Louis collapsed in despair after realizing the Bird had been transferred as overseer of the camp.
In August of 1945, Nagasaki and Hiroshima were hit with atomic bombs, forcing the Japanese to surrender. On August 20th, while the prisoners were forced to go into a cold body of water, an American fighter flew over the camp and signaled that the war had finally ended. Soon after, Louis and his fellow captive soldiers were rescued and returned home to their loved ones. Shortly after returning, he met and married Cynthia Applewhite.
After the war, Louis was overcome by his hatred of his former captors and was unable to live a happy life. He developed severe PTSD, as well as violent tendencies, and abused alcohol. This went on until he met a young preacher named Billy Graham. Through him, Louis began to come to terms with the events of his life. And the story ends with Louis returning to Japan and revisiting some of his imprisoned former captors in Sugamo prison. Upon this meeting, Louis forgave his captors and greeted them warmly. Unbroken is set in the time period around World War II, focusing on the main character, Louis Zamperini. It starts off by describing his rough and fast-paced childhood. As a boy, Louis was a thief who stole from stores in his neighborhood. The same attributes that had made Louis the boy terror of Torrance were keeping him alive in the greatest struggle of his life.
This is, perhaps, where he got his start in running, by running from the law. As he got older, he channeled his energy into the track, where at first he struggled, but later had great success. His success on the track carried him to the 1936 Berlin Olympic Games. This brings up the theme of redemption. Louis redeemed himself by turning his life around and using running as an outlet that benefited his community. He brought pride and recognition to Torrance when he entered the Olympics. While he did not win any medals, he managed to break a U.S. record running time. Louis never gave up on his dreams, which shows that he was a persistent person that was willing to push himself in order to achieve his goals. Because of this, he planned to come back to the 1940 Games and win big.
The Olympic Games in 1940 had to be postponed due to the war in Europe. Finland had been invaded. Because Louis would be unable to run in the Games, he enlisted in the Air Force. Louis later realized that he was not suited for the Air Force and dropped out. On December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor was attacked, which hurled the U.S. into the war. Louis was drafted, and because he had signed a contract with the Air Force, was sent back to be a pilot. Although Louis feared flying, he fought through it in order to do his job. Louis continually shows his unbreakable spirit by fighting through situations that most other people would be unable to handle.